I never expected the knife to come from my own family. One second, I was laughing under a string of patio lights at my cousin's graduation party, barefoot in the soft Texas grass, drink in hand, boyfriend at my side. The next, I was standing in a hallway of my aunt's big brick house outside Austin, frozen by a voice I knew better than my own. "She's sweet, sure, but she's not who you build a life with." My mother's voice, low, smooth, southern, casual, like she was talking about casserole recipes. She wasn't. She was talking about me. I stopped mid-step. The door to the study was cracked an inch. I didn't mean to listen. I didn't want to listen. But I did. "She's chasing dreams that don't pay bills," Mom said. "You need someone with a future, Max. Someone like Rachel." Rachel, my older sister. "Rachel made senior counsel in under 5 years," she added, pride dripping from every syllable, "and Lena's still trying to sell her little paintings to coffee shops." Every word felt like a slap. Silence followed, heavy and full of meaning. I waited for Max to speak, to defend me, to laugh it off, but he didn't. He just stood there. Quiet. "I mean," my mother continued, her tone softening like a snake coiling for a second strike. "You've felt it too, haven't you? The difference. Rachel's strong. She pushes people forward. Lena holds them back." I wanted to scream, to rip the door open, to say, "Are you serious?" But I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. "She's been watching you for years," Mom added, lowering her voice. "Just waiting for her chance." Max cleared his throat. "I don't know, Diane. Lena and we've been together a while." "And what has that given you?" she asked with a snap. "Rachel just settled a 7-figure case. Lena's still making sketches and selling them on Etsy." I backed away like I'd touched something burning. My mother's words hurt, but Max's silence, that nearly killed me. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I slipped back through the hallway, swallowed the ache in my throat, and rejoined the party like nothing had happened. I smiled, even laughed at someone's joke, and when Max returned minutes later with 2 drinks in hand, I took mine with steady fingers. But the Lena that existed before that hallway was already gone. Later that night, we sat on the couch in his apartment watching some show I couldn't focus on. He leaned into me. I leaned back. It was muscle memory at that point, but my body felt hollow, my skin too thin. He didn't know I knew, not yet. And I didn't plan to confront him, not then, not that way. Maybe I wasn't ready. Or maybe I already knew the truth and just needed to see how far they'd take it. That was my first mistake. What came next unraveled slowly, like a fuse burning toward a stick of dynamite I couldn't defuse in time. Everything changed after that night. Not all at once, but like slow rot in the foundation of a house you thought was solid. I didn't confront Max. Not immediately. I wanted to see it for myself. Needed to. I started watching the way he looked at Rachel. We'd go to Sunday dinners at my parents' place, and I'd see it. The small things. The way his gaze lingered when she walked into the room. How he laughed a little louder at her jokes. How their conversations felt easy, electric, even from across the table. And Rachel? She didn't hide it. She smiled at him like she knew something I didn't. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was projecting, that maybe I was just still hurting from what I'd overheard. But then came the casual mentions. "Did I tell you Rachel won that arbitration case?" Max would say over takeout. "She started training for that charity triathlon. She's seriously toned. I think it's the rowing." Or the time he said, "Rachel recommended this new documentary series about trial law. It's intense. You'd probably be bored by it, though." Every time he brought her up, it felt like a splinter under my skin. Small, sharp, always there. Then came the missed date nights. At first it was work. Then, "I'm too wiped, can we just chill?" became his standard excuse. Then it was, "Hey, I ran into Rachel downtown." We grabbed lunch. Without telling me. I let it slide. I told myself they were family. My sister, my boyfriend. They should be friendly. But friendly doesn't involve inside jokes I'm not part of. Or late-night texts I only found because he left his phone open on the nightstand while he showered. The messages weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. Rachel, you always did know how to read me. Max, well, I had 3 years of practice. Rachel, don't tempt me. I stared at the screen for a long time. My mouth went dry. My hands went cold. When he came out of the bathroom, towel slung low on his hips, I was sitting on the edge of the bed holding his phone. You want to tell me what this is? I asked. Calm, too calm. He looked confused for a second. Then he saw the screen. Lena, it's nothing. I ran into her. We were just catching up. Catching up? I echoed. Because this doesn't read like catching up, Max. He scratched the back of his neck, already defensive. Come on, it's Rachel, your sister. It would be weird if we didn't get along. I stood. Weird would be exchanging Christmas cards. This is flirting. You're overreacting. The way he said it, dismissive, tired, made something break inside me. Not a scream, not even a tear. Just the quiet snap of belief giving way. I left that night, but not for good. I needed time to think, to process. I called Maya. She always had a way of cutting through my emotional fog. Lena, she said flatly after I explained, you know what this is? You're trying not to say it out loud because that makes it real. What if I'm wrong? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Then he should be working his ass off to prove it, she said. But he's not. And deep down, you know why. 3 weeks later, I got my answer. It was a Friday night. I'd scored tickets to see the Wild Pines, Max's favorite band. It was meant to be a surprise, a peace offering, maybe even a turning point. We hadn't been good lately, but part of me still wanted to believe we could be. I still had a key to his apartment. We'd talked about moving in together before everything started unraveling, so I let myself in. The place was quiet. Too quiet. There was a trail, a shirt, a scarf, a pair of black heels, Rachel's heels. I recognized them. She wore them to Easter dinner. My heart dropped, but I followed the trail. My body was moving before my brain caught up. The bedroom door was cracked. Inside, Rachel lay across Max's chest, tangled in his sheets, her lips on his neck, laughing at something he whispered. His hand rested low on her back like it belonged there. I didn't make a sound. I just stood in the doorway and let the envelope with the concert tickets fall from my hand. They fluttered to the floor like confetti for a party I wasn't invited to. Rachel looked up first, didn't even flinch. This isn't, Max started, scrambling to cover himself. Don't, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It was calm, final. Don't say it's not what it looks like. Don't lie to me. Rachel sat up slowly, made no move to cover herself. You were going to find out eventually. Her voice was flat, unapologetic, like we were discussing a late bill, not betrayal. How long? I asked, even though I already knew. 2 months, Max admitted, finally looking at me. Officially. I nodded once, then quieter. Since my mom's little talk with you? His eyes widened. He hadn't known I'd heard that conversation. Their silence was answer enough. I walked out without another word. No screaming, no crying, just silence, clean and cold. Later that night, back in my apartment, I sat in the dark for hours, not moving, not speaking, just breathing. Because what do you do when your boyfriend, your sister, and your mother all betray you in the same season? You break, and then you decide what to do with the pieces. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house. My mother was arranging lilies in the kitchen like nothing had happened. Why? I asked her. Just that. One word. She didn't even look up. Don't be dramatic, Lena. Relationships end. It's not the end of the world. You encouraged him to leave me for Rachel. I pointed out the truth. Rachel's more stable. She has direction. She shrugged. You've always been creative, dreamy. But that's not what men build futures on. She finally looked at me then, cold, appraising. You'll find someone more suited to your temperament, someone softer. Rachel and Max make more sense. That was when I knew. She had never seen me. Not really. Not for who I was. "You're wrong about me," I whispered. "You always have been." That night, I packed everything I could fit into the back of my car. My apartment wasn't much: some secondhand furniture, a closet full of paint-splattered clothes, my portfolio of artwork. I didn't tell anyone goodbye. I left a single note on the kitchen table of my parents' house. 3 words: "Watch me rise." The morning I left Austin, the sky was a pale gray, heavy with the kind of humidity that settles in your bones. I loaded the last box into the back of my old Honda, shut the trunk, and stood there for a minute with my hands on my hips, staring at the apartment I'd called home for the past 4 years. It wasn't much: peeling paint, weak water pressure, and neighbors who always blasted country music at 2 a.m. But it had been mine. Inside that apartment, I'd painted until my fingers cramped. I'd dreamed of building something honest, and I'd loved a man who saw me as a placeholder until someone better came along. I walked back up the stairs one last time. The place was nearly empty, just some broken-down canvases I couldn't fit, and an old reading chair with a busted leg. I left the keys on the counter. Taped to the fridge was a sticky note I'd written hours earlier when my hands were still shaking. "Watch me rise. No explanation, no goodbye. I didn't owe them that." By 9 a.m., I was on the highway, headed west toward Denver. My best friend Maya had a cousin there who offered me a couch to crash on. It wasn't glamorous, but it was far. And far was good. Each mile between me and Austin felt like oxygen, like I was breathing in possibility and exhaling everything I'd left behind: every fake smile, every family dinner where I'd played second fiddle to Rachel, every night I'd waited for Max to come home, pretending I didn't feel the distance growing like a crack down the middle of my life. The plan was simple: get to Denver, find a job, find a room, and figure out what came next. My savings were enough to float me for maybe 2 months, 3 if I ate a lot of instant noodles and skipped heating. Still, I had something I hadn't had in a long time: hunger. Not the kind that gnaws at your stomach. The kind that burns in your chest, the kind that says, "Let them doubt you. You'll show them." Halfway through New Mexico, I hit a storm. Sheets of rain smacked my windshield, turning the road into a smear of brake lights and water. I had to pull over at a gas station outside Santa Rosa and wait it out. I sat there for an hour, the engine off, rain drumming on the roof like war drums. My sketchbook sat in the passenger seat, untouched. I hadn't drawn since the night I left Max's apartment. I opened it. The pencil felt strange in my hand, foreign, like a language I hadn't spoken in years. But after a few false starts, my fingers remembered what my mind had tried to forget. The lines were shaky at first, but they steadied. I drew eyes. Not mine, not Rachel's, not even Max's. Just eyes, wide, clear, awake. When the storm cleared, I drove straight through the night. I rolled into Denver just after sunrise. The city was wrapped in gold light, the mountains rising like quiet witnesses in the distance. I'd never been here before. I didn't know a single soul except Maya's cousin, and even she was more of a voice on the phone than a real person in my life. But I felt something strange as I crossed into the city limits, something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Maya's cousin, Tony, lived in a 1-bedroom walk-up near Colfax. She answered the door in fuzzy socks and a hoodie that said, "Support local art," which I took as a sign from the universe that maybe I wasn't completely off track. "You're Lena, right?" she asked, stepping aside to let me in. "Yeah. Thanks again for—" "Don't thank me yet," she said, grinning. "The couch sinks in the middle, and my upstairs neighbor thinks he's a DJ." She handed me a towel, pointed toward the bathroom, and said, "Shower first. Then we talk strategy." That night, I lay on her couch staring at the ceiling fan, listening to faint techno beats from above and the distant rumble of city traffic. My sketchbook rested on my stomach, a fresh page already half full with something new, something alive. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for someone else to define me. I got up early the next morning and made a list on the back of an envelope: apartment, job, coffee, don't go back. Denver was a patchwork of ambition and second chances. I hit the streets with my resume in hand, walking into galleries, coffee shops, bookstores, and offices. Most said no, Some didn't even say that much. One man glanced at my portfolio and said, "That's cute," before walking off. By the end of week 1, I'd applied to 47 places. No bites. Week 2, I landed one interview at a local cafe. The manager canceled last minute. Week 3, my savings were almost gone. I stood in line at a temp agency sandwiched between a guy with paint on his boots and a woman who looked like she'd been crying for days. And then, on a Tuesday that felt like a dead end, I saw a flyer taped to a streetlight outside a bookstore. A small finance firm was hiring a front desk receptionist. Silveridge Ventures, downtown Denver, walk-ins welcome. I had no background in finance. I didn't even know what a receptionist at a firm like that did. But I walked in the next morning wearing my best department store dress, a fake smile, and a lot of desperation. I handed my resume to a woman in a navy blazer who looked like she hadn't smiled since the Clinton administration. "There's been a change," she said after skimming my application. "The receptionist role was filled internally." My heart dropped. "But," she added, standing up, "Mr. Reynolds asked me to send any remaining applicants to his office. He's looking for a new assistant." "Assistant to one of our junior partners. He's particular," she added with a tight-lipped smile, "but talented." That was how I met Noah Reynolds, standing in the doorway of his office, surrounded by takeout containers and piles of paperwork, wondering what the hell I'd just walked into. But something in his tired eyes and messy desk made me pause, and something in me whispered, "This is where it begins." Noah Reynolds looked nothing like I expected a financial professional to look. When the receptionist led me to his office, I braced myself for a stiff handshake, a suit that cost more than my car, and that patronizing tone people used when talking to someone between jobs. What I got instead was chaos. Papers were stacked in towers on his desk and windowsills. A cold cup of black coffee teetered on top of a folder labeled "Quarterly Forecasts. Do not touch." His tie was half undone, and his dark button-up was wrinkled like he'd slept in it, which, judging by the cot shoved in the corner behind the door, might have been true. He looked up, startled. "You're not HR," he said. "Nope," I said, straightening my shoulders. "I'm your last hope." That made him blink. "Noah Reynolds," he said, standing and offering a firm handshake. "Junior partner, Silveridge Ventures. Ignore the mess. I'm between assistants." "Lena Carter," I replied. "Between lives." He laughed, just once, but it was real. "Can you organize chaos?" he asked. "I make order out of creative disaster for a living," I said. "I used to run an art studio." "I need someone who won't run screaming after 2 weeks. I made it through 6 years with my family. I can handle worse." He sat back down, scanned my resume again, then looked up with a half smile. "You're overqualified, but desperate enough to take the job." "Exactly." He nodded. "You start tomorrow. Hope you like cold coffee and 16-hour days." That was my official welcome into the most bizarre, exhausting, and strangely fulfilling job I'd ever had. The first week nearly broke me. I showed up at 7:30 a.m. in my only business outfit. Noah was already there, hair wild, shirt sleeves rolled up, halfway through a burrito and a mountain of client portfolios. His brain ran faster than he could speak sometimes, and his to-do list looked like a crime scene. Crossed-out items, arrows pointing nowhere, coffee stains on everything. He never slowed down. He forgot to eat, forgot to sleep. Once I found a memo he'd written at 2:38 a.m. on the back of a takeout menu. I offered to retype it. He said, "Don't bother, I can't read it either." I should have hated it. The hours were brutal. The pay barely covered my half of rent at Tony's. But I didn't hate it. I liked the challenge. I liked making something broken run again. And most of all, I liked Noah. Not in that way, not then, but in a "this guy is actually brilliant and just needs someone to believe in him" kind of way. And maybe, in some twisted reflection, I saw myself in that. I learned fast. Within 2 weeks, I'd color-coded his files, created a digital project tracker, and set up recurring calendar reminders to make sure he didn't miss his own meetings. Noah started calling me the brain. "I'm just the tornado," he'd say, waving his arms at his desk. "You're the structure." We started eating lunch together. At first, it was just logistics. Neither of us had time to leave the office, but eventually it became ritual. There was a taco truck a few blocks down that made the kind of food that reminded me I was alive. We'd sit on the loading dock behind the building with our legs dangling over the edge, watching traffic while devouring carnitas and cold soda. "You always this chill under pressure?" he asked once, licking salsa off his thumb. "No," I said, "but I've learned that panic doesn't solve anything. Only plans do." Spoken like someone who's had to start from scratch. I glanced over. His gaze was sharp, thoughtful. I hadn't told him much. Not about Austin, not about Rachel or Max or the day I walked in on them tangled in each other like I never existed. That story stayed locked behind my ribs. "Something like that," I said, looking away. Noah didn't press, and I respected him more for that. We fell into rhythm, early mornings, late nights, deadlines that felt like cliffs. It wasn't glamorous, but it was progress. Every task I mastered, every day I kept things running, I felt a little stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. One Thursday night around 11 p.m., I was reordering his files again when he looked up from his laptop and asked, "Why are you still here?" I paused, "Because the work's not done." He leaned back, arms crossed, studying me. "Most people don't give a damn about other people's businesses. Most people haven't had theirs stolen." I didn't mean to say it. It just came out. His eyes flicked to mine. Noah didn't ask, just nodded like he understood. And somehow, that meant more than any apology or sympathy ever could. After that, something shifted. Not in a romantic way, yet, but in trust, in unspoken respect. It was Noah who first brought up the idea that would change everything. We were knee-deep in budget forecasts for a startup that wanted to install solar panels on schools across Colorado. He rubbed his temples and said, "I don't want to just make rich people richer. I want to do something that matters." I looked up. "So do it." He blinked. "What?" "Start your own firm. Build it the way you believe in. Ethical investments, community-driven growth. You talk about this stuff all the time." He chuckled. "Sure, and I'll just wave a wand and hire a team out of thin air?" "You don't need a team," I said. "You need a partner." That word hung between us for a beat. He tilted his head. "Are you offering?" "I'm offering organization, strategy, planning, branding, systems, communication, everything you're bad at." He laughed. "Okay, that's fair. Plus," I added, "I believe in this." He studied me again. "You'd leave Silveridge?" "I left a whole damn life behind in Texas. What's one more leap?" Noah grinned. "Then let's build something real." That night I walked home through the quiet Denver streets, the cold wind biting at my cheeks. I pulled my coat tighter around me, but inside, I was on fire. Not because of love, not yet, but because for the first time since Austin, I wasn't trying to get back what I lost. I was chasing what I deserved. The first day we worked on our new venture didn't happen in an office. It happened in Noah's one-bedroom apartment, surrounded by takeout boxes, whiteboards he bought from Office Depot at 10 p.m., and the hum of an ancient space heater that clicked every time it kicked on. The dining table became our war room. The couch became our nap zone. The floor? Covered in business books, crumpled sticky notes, and half-finished diagrams drawn in Sharpie on printer paper. We were underfunded, overworked, and completely in over our heads. And I had never felt more alive. Noah named the company Raincore Capital. It was his last name and core, as in core values: integrity, impact, and innovation. He joked it sounded like a tech startup crossed with a gym. I designed the logo. Clean, bold lines, a color palette rooted in greens and blues, growth and trust. "Looks expensive," he said when I showed it to him. "It looks serious," I replied, "because we are." We didn't have investors yet, or even clients, but we had a plan, and when you've lost everything, a plan is enough to start rebuilding. Our days were 14-hour marathons of research, financial modeling, and figuring out how to launch a firm with nothing but Wi-Fi and willpower. Our nights? That's when the quiet moments happened. Like when I spilled coffee across a legal contract draft and burst into tears from sheer exhaustion. Noah didn't yell, didn't even flinch. "It's just paper," he said softly, handing me a dish towel. "We'll reprint it. Breathe, Carter." Or the time he accidentally texted me a message meant for his brother. Something about a disastrous Tinder date and a woman who'd brought her emotional support iguana to dinner. I snorted so hard I nearly choked on my energy drink. From that night on, we called disaster moments iguana-level chaos. We didn't talk much about our pasts. It wasn't a conscious choice. It just didn't come up. Until it did. One Thursday night, we were reviewing potential client leads when Noah mentioned his dad. "He wanted me to take over the family construction company," he said, staring at his laptop screen like it held all the answers. I told him I wanted to do something different, something smarter. We haven't really talked since. I hesitated. Then, "My mom thinks I'm a failure." His eyes flicked toward me. I kept going. "She told my ex I was too soft, that I'd never amount to anything, encouraged him to cheat with my sister." Noah winced. "Damn. Yeah, family fun." He didn't say anything for a long time, just nodded, slowly. That silence meant more to me than any lecture or pity ever could. Over the next few months, we got better, smoother. We found a rhythm. He stopped over-explaining his ideas. I stopped second-guessing mine. He built strategies. I built systems. He brought vision. I brought clarity. We were still running the company from his apartment, still living on ramen and caffeine, but people were starting to take notice. A few local entrepreneurs came to us looking for advice. A woman who ran a mobile health clinic hired us to help scale her nonprofit model. A sustainable packaging startup asked us to pitch them to investors. Every win felt huge. Every tiny victory fueled the next. One Friday, Noah walked in carrying Thai food and a six-pack of cheap beer. "We made $5,000 this month," he said, grinning like a kid. "You know what that means?" "We can buy furniture that doesn't fold," I joked. "We can pay rent and eat." Wild concept. He opened 2 beers, handed me one, and tapped his bottle to mine. "To scraping by," he said. "To showing them we can," I replied. The shift between us wasn't dramatic. It was slow, subtle, and undeniable. The first time he touched my hand, it was accidental, reaching for the same folder. But neither of us pulled away right away. The first time we stood too close? At the printer, laughing about something stupid one of our interns had said. And the first time we kissed? It was after landing our biggest client yet, an energy startup looking for a partner who actually cared about ethics, not just numbers. We'd stayed up all night prepping, delivered the pitch in a hotel lobby because we didn't have a real office. When they said yes, I jumped, literally, into his arms, laughing, delirious, exhausted. And when he set me down, he didn't let go. It just happened. One second we were partners, the next his mouth was on mine, warm and certain, like we'd been heading toward this the entire time. Neither of us said a word after. We just sat on the floor, sharing pad thai and staring at the ceiling like the world had just cracked open in front of us. But we didn't rush anything. We didn't want to ruin what we were building, personally or professionally. So we agreed, keep it quiet, keep it simple. We were still broke. Still struggling, still sharing a workspace with a couch and a printer that jammed if you looked at it wrong. But now, there was something between us, a connection that went deeper than late nights and shared goals. Respect, trust, fire. We didn't talk about love, not yet, but we didn't need to. One night as we sat together on the balcony, drinking the last 2 beers from the fridge and watching the Denver skyline glow against the dark, I turned to him and said, "Do you ever feel like you were meant for more?" He didn't look at me, just nodded. "I do now." Noah never proposed the way you'd expect. There was no candlelit dinner, no violin music, No ring box hidden in a dessert. It happened on a Wednesday just past midnight in our living room, which doubled as our office, our conference room, and sometimes our crash pad. We were surrounded by empty takeout containers and investment pitch drafts. I was in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt. He was in socks with holes in the toes. And yet, something about that moment felt more real than any fairy tale ever could. We'd just wrapped our final pitch deck for a potential investor meeting in Boulder. I was nursing a cup of coffee I didn't need, and he was leaning back in his chair, rubbing the back of his neck. "You ever think about the future?" he asked, eyes half-lidded from exhaustion. "All the time," I said. "Kind of required when you're betting your life on a startup." "No," he said, sitting up straighter. "I mean, our future." I turned slowly, unsure what he was getting at. "Like, company goals?" "No, like, you and me." The room stilled. Even the furnace seemed to pause. He stood, came around the table, and crouched in front of me, hands on my knees. "I want you as my partner in all of it. Business, life, chaos, ugly socks and printer meltdowns, all of it. Marry me." There was no diamond, no script. Just Noah, raw and steady, and full of that quiet kind of certainty that makes everything else feel noisy and small. I didn't speak right away, not because I was unsure, but because I felt something deep crack open inside me, a piece that had once been broken, now being rebuilt. "People will say it's too soon," I whispered. "Let them," he said. "I've never been more sure of anything." I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just nodded and said, "Yes." We didn't have a wedding. Not a big one anyway. 3 weeks later, we stood in front of a city clerk in downtown Denver with Maya on FaceTime and Noah's younger brother Liam as our witness. I wore a cream-wrapped dress I got on clearance. He wore a charcoal suit with a wrinkled collar. There were no flowers, no aisle, no first dance. But when Noah looked me in the eye and said, "I choose you as my partner in all things," something inside me finally healed. We went out to lunch at our favorite Vietnamese spot afterward. Mrs. Nguyen, the owner, insisted on decorating our table with fresh flowers and brought out a bottle of champagne she'd been saving for a good customers special day. She didn't even charge us. "To partnerships that lift us higher," Noah toasted. I clinked my glass against his, heart full. Reality, of course, didn't wait for us to enjoy the honeymoon phase. Within days, we were back to grinding. We still worked out of our apartment, still met clients in cafes or hotel lobbies to make ourselves seem more established. We bought nicer folders and dressed sharper, but we were still bootstrapping everything. Noah spent hours each night refining pitch decks, refining financial projections, chasing leads. I managed schedules, drafted proposals, and juggled 5 different inboxes like a circus act with no net. Sometimes we argued, like the night he wanted to sink our emergency savings into a marketing campaign that I thought was too risky. "You're thinking too small," he snapped. "And you're forgetting we need rent money next month," I shot back. It ended with slammed doors, cold silence, and both of us sleeping badly. But by morning, we met in the kitchen, bleary-eyed, and landed on a compromise, half for growth, half for stability. That became our pattern. His fire, my foundation. Together, we balanced each other. 4 months after the wedding, the breakthrough came. We pitched a sustainable energy startup based in Seattle, a scrappy group trying to get solar panels into public schools across the country. Their mission aligned perfectly with our vision. Noah built the investment pitch of his life. I designed packets that combined hard data with storytelling, showing not just ROI but real community impact. We stayed up all night printing, double-checking, rehearsing. At one point, I caught him watching me across the room. "What?" I asked, hair in a messy bun, sweatpants on, highlighter in hand. "Nothing," he said, smiling. "Just wondering how I got lucky enough to marry someone who makes spreadsheets look like poetry." I rolled my eyes. "You're sleep-deprived." Still true. We won the client, and not just them. 3 of their partner companies followed. Just like that, we had momentum. And for the first time since the day I drove out of Austin with everything I owned in the back seat, I could see the future coming into focus. Noah wanted to celebrate, of course. He ordered takeout from Mrs. Nguyen's again, recreated our wedding lunch down to the mismatched bowls and tiny flower centerpiece. "To our first big win," he said, raising his glass of grocery store wine in a coffee mug. I toasted back and he added, "And to my brilliant wife, who never stopped believing, even when I almost did." I blinked fast to keep tears from forming, because I had believed, even when it hurt, even when I didn't know if we'd make it, even when I was cleaning other people's messes while fighting to build my own name. Things picked up from there. Referrals came faster, meetings got easier, our name started showing up in small industry blogs and investment circles, people started reaching out to us, not the other way around. Of course, success brought new chaos, more work, more pressure, more sleepless nights. We still couldn't afford a proper office. Our dining table was always buried under paperwork, and interns worked from our living room floor. But that didn't matter, because we had something people couldn't fake. Alignment. Noah dreamed big. I made it real. He set direction. I set pace. We weren't just building a business anymore. We were building something bigger, something rooted in shared values, in sweat and sacrifice, in the kind of trust that comes only from battle-testing love. One night, after we signed our first six-figure retainer client, I stepped outside to get some air. The city was quiet. Denver was cooling down for the night. Lights sparkled from high-rises in the distance. Noah joined me a minute later, 2 mugs of cocoa in hand. "What if we actually pull this off?" he asked. I looked at him and smiled. "We already are. If you'd told me a year earlier that I'd be living in a 1-bedroom Denver apartment with filing cabinets doubling as nightstands, working 80 hours a week with my husband/business partner, I'd have laughed or cried, maybe both. But that's exactly where life had taken me. We were still running Raincore Capital out of our apartment. The dining table was our main conference space. We held team meetings on the living room floor. Client calls happened in the bedroom, door closed, laptop propped on a laundry basket to get the angle right. It wasn't glamorous, but it was working. Bit by bit, we were building momentum. A green packaging startup came on board, then a tech-for-good nonprofit, then a vegan skincare company that wanted to scale its eco-footprint without selling its soul to a corporate giant. We weren't just making money, we were making a name, which meant we were also running out of space. Fast. I found sticky notes in the cereal box again. I called from the kitchen one morning. "That's your fault," Noah yelled from the bedroom. "You put the grocery list on Project Timelines. That's a crossover episode I wasn't ready for." I snorted, holding up the sticky note, order toner, and almond milk. Despite the chaos, we were happy. Tired, sure, but fulfilled. Most nights ended with the 2 of us cross-legged on the floor, debriefing the day over leftovers. Our dinners were usually a mix of financial projections and marriage logistics. "You handled the client call with grace," I'd say, passing him a fork. "You prevented me from calling a venture capitalist an arrogant blowhard," he'd reply, "so we'll call it even." Still, the more our business grew, the harder it became to find the line between work and life, because for us, they were the same thing. We didn't fight often, but when we did, it hit hard. Our first real blowout happened 6 months after our wedding. It started with money. We'd just lost a potential investor who'd wanted us to take on a fossil fuel client for balance. Noah refused. I agreed, but it stung. We needed cash flow. Later that week, he suggested using our emergency fund to fast-track hiring a junior analyst. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "We can't just blow through every safety net we have," I said. "We're not blowing it. We're investing it." "Noah, we still live in a 700-square-foot apartment with unpaid interns. We are the safety net." His jaw clenched. "You're thinking small again. And you're thinking reckless." That shut us both up. We slept in silence that night, backs turned, thoughts racing. By morning, we met at the coffee pot and did what we always did, found middle ground, half for growth, half for security. It wasn't about winning, it was about staying on the same team. That's the thing people don't tell you about building a life together. Sometimes love looks like spreadsheets and compromise and choosing to calm down before you're right. 8 months into our marriage, opportunity finally knocked, loud and clear. A mid-sized sustainable energy company based in Oregon was looking for investment partners who understood both their mission and their market. They were skeptical of big firms, wanted something different, purpose-driven, scrappy but strategic. In other words, us. Noah spent 2 weeks creating the perfect pitch, clear ROI, real-world outcomes, and projected savings backed by data. I designed a presentation packet that looked like it came out of a top-tier agency. We drove to Portland in Noah's beat-up sedan, sleeping in motels along the way, eating gas station snacks, reviewing notes at every roadside diner with decent Wi-Fi. When we walked into their boardroom, I could feel their eyes sizing us up. We didn't look like power players. We didn't have suits that cost 4 figures or assistants trailing behind us. But when we spoke, when we shared our story, our vision, our why, they listened. And when they said yes? We sat in the parking lot afterward, laughing like idiots, eating drive-through fries and toasting with sparkling water. "This changes everything," Noah said. And it did. Because that client didn't just hire us. They introduced us to 3 others. We were finally growing beyond what our apartment could contain. We signed a lease on a modest office space downtown, exposed brick walls, creaky floors, and sunlight that poured in through tall windows. It smelled like dust and coffee and fresh starts. The move felt like crossing a line between surviving and becoming something real. With the office came clearer roles. I stepped fully into operations, building systems, managing teams, handling client onboarding. Noah focused on growth, strategy, pitching, vision. We still worked late, still argued, still forgot to eat dinner at least once a week. But now we had a space to be professional, to breathe, to separate our marriage from our work, if only by a few city blocks. At home, things softened again. Sunday mornings were sacred. Coffee, the paper, no laptops allowed. We hosted small dinner parties for the first time, even got away to the mountains for a weekend when one of our interns practically begged us to take time off. We talked about starting a family, just whispers, not plans. But the fact that we could dream again, that meant everything. 3 years in, Raincore was profitable, respected, and expanding. We'd opened satellite partnerships in 2 neighboring states. Our team had grown to 12. Clients described us as a firm with a soul. Investors respected us, entrepreneurs trusted us, and people finally stopped calling me the assistant. Because by then, I wasn't just someone who helped build the company, I was its backbone. I'd designed every internal system, every operating procedure, every project flow. Executives came to me for clarity, for judgment, for direction, and when they did, they used my title with confidence. Chief Operating Officer. I'd never needed the validation, but damn, it felt good. One night, Noah and I walked through our office, lights dimmed, city buzzing outside. He stopped in front of the framed logo on the wall. Our logo. "You know," he said quietly, "we really did it." I smiled, "And we're just getting started." Then he turned to me, his voice lower. "Sometimes I think about that first day, you standing in my disaster of an office offering to organize my life." "You were a mess," I said, laughing. "You saved me." "Noah," I said, resting my hand on his chest, "we saved each other." The past has a cruel sense of timing. It had been nearly 5 years since I left Austin in the rearview mirror. 5 years since I walked in on my sister and my boyfriend tangled in betrayal and walked out of my life without looking back. By then, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Our company had expanded into new markets. We had a real office, a growing team, clients waiting months to work with us. Noah had just been named one of Forbes's top 30 under 40 in ethical investment. And me? I'd just signed off on our biggest hire yet, a national operations director reporting directly to me. Life was full. So full that I barely thought about Rachel anymore. Until Noah slid a magazine across the breakfast table one Tuesday morning. "You might want to see this," he said gently. I looked down at the cover. Business Impact Weekly. The bottom corner headline read, "Benton and Reeves faces collapse after failed expansion." My eyes locked on the byline. I didn't need to read the article. I knew the name. Benton, as in Max Benton, Reeves, as in Rachel Reeves, my sister. The law firm they'd built together after my mother orchestrated their perfect match was imploding. I didn't know what hit me harder, the poetic irony or the strange ache I hadn't expected to feel. I looked up slowly. "You're following news from Austin now?" Noah shook his head. "Number. But we're in talks to acquire a company Max works for now. Legal services are tied through Benton and Reeves." I blinked. "You're telling me we're about to acquire the same company my ex now works for?" "Technically, yes. He's in their compliance department, several layers below us." He paused. "I thought you should hear it from me first, before it starts circulating through the office." My heart thudded, not out of fear, not even anger, just wait. Like the past had suddenly found my address again. I picked up the magazine and flipped through the article. The collapse was swift. Rachel had tried to scale the firm nationally, burned through capital too fast, and lost key clients in the process. Their expansion failed, debt mounted, reputation tanked. Max had quietly left the firm and taken a demotion to join the compliance team at a Denver-based holding group, now seeking a partnership with us. The same Max who once nodded thoughtfully while my mother compared my art career to a failed hobby. The same Rachel who once told me I'd thank her someday for taking the pressure off. Now they were buried under the wreckage of their own ambition. "Does this change anything for you?" Noah asked. I closed the magazine. "It's just business," I said. But we both knew it wasn't just that. 2 weeks later, the acquisition was finalized. Our company now had full control over the holding firm that employed Max, and indirectly what remained of Rachel's legal practice. Technically, Max now reported to people who reported to me. I didn't feel smug. I felt strangely still. One night, Noah and I were reviewing the integration plan when he paused and said, "We should host a gala." "For the acquisition?" "And to showcase the expanded portfolio, bring in stakeholders, introduce the Denver team, celebrate how far we've come." I nodded. It's been a while since we did something big. He watched me carefully. "I think we should invite Max and Rachel." I didn't answer right away. "And your mother," he added, "if you're ready." I turned slowly, eyebrows raised. "Why would I want to do that?" "Because sometimes," he said, "the best way to close a chapter is to let people see how far you've come, without rubbing their faces in it." "I don't need closure," I said. "Maybe not. But maybe you deserve to be seen. On your own terms." I stared at the laptop screen for a long moment. Not for revenge, not to show off, but because a part of me still wanted them to know, "You didn't break me, you launched me." I clicked the trackpad and said, "Invite them." The weeks leading up to the gala were a blur. The event coordinator, Paige, said I was the most hands-on executive she'd ever worked with. I selected every detail with purpose: the venue, the Denver Museum of Art, sleek and modern; the menu, organic, locally sourced; the music, a jazz quartet that played subtle, confident swing. Nothing flashy, everything intentional. When the guest list was finalized, I stared at the last 3 names: Max Benton, Rachel Reeves, Diane Carter, each name like a ghost I'd buried. They'd all RSP'd. 3 nights before the gala, I stood in our bedroom trying on dresses. None of them felt right. Too sparkly, too conservative, too try hard. Then I found it. An emerald green gown, floor length, clean silhouette. It hugged my curves without apology, bold without being loud. When I stepped out, Noah looked up from his laptop and whistled low. "Damn." I smirked. "Too much?" "No," he said, standing. "Exactly enough." Then, more seriously, "You ready for this?" I met his eyes in the mirror. I thought I was doing this for them. But I'm not. I'm doing it for her. Her? The girl who left Austin with nothing but heartbreak and a dream. She deserves to stand in that room. He nodded. "Then let's show them what she built." The night of the gala, the museum glowed with soft golden light. Guests arrived in waves, clients, partners, press. Noah and I greeted them all, side by side. I wore the emerald gown with a single diamond pendant. My hair, once long and soft like Rachel's, was now in a sleek bob that framed my jaw like armor. And then I saw them. My mother entered first, in a navy dress that screamed old money and careful intentions. Rachel followed, wearing red like it was a weapon. Max trailed behind, older, heavier in the face, uncertain in his eyes. They stopped just inside the doorway, taking in the art-lined walls, the elegant guests, the refined confidence of the room. Then their eyes found me, and just for a second, just a flicker, I saw it. Shock. Recognition. Maybe even regret. I didn't move. Let them come to me. I didn't approach them. Not at first. Let them stand in it a while. Let them absorb what they were walking into. The space, the guests, the success they never thought I'd touch. My mother, Rachel, and Max lingered near the edge of the gala like newcomers at a country club they weren't quite sure would let them stay. I watched them from across the room while chatting with the mayor about clean energy grants. Noah stood beside me, poised and confident in a classic black tux, his hand resting lightly on my back. He wasn't playing a role. He wasn't faking charm. This wasn't a performance. This was us. And when our eyes met across that ballroom, everything that had ever tried to break me felt small. Eventually, they made their way across the room. My mother reached me first, all polished charm and social performance. "Lena," she said, arms open, lips pursed in a tight smile. "Darling, you look absolutely radiant." I gave her the briefest hug possible. "Mother, glad you could make it." Her eyes flicked to Noah. "You must be the husband I've heard so much about." He offered his hand. "Noah Reynolds, co-founder, Raincore Capital." Rachel stepped in next, hand extended. "Your reputation precedes you." "Likewise," Noah said smoothly, shaking it once before slipping his hand back into mine. "Lena's operational genius made this company possible." Subtle, director, true. Rachel didn't flinch, but something shifted in her eyes. Max, of course, looked like he'd swallowed glass. "Compliance officer at Halcyon Holdings," he said stiffly. "We're familiar," I said, my tone measured. "Welcome to the family of companies." If he hadn't understood the power dynamic before, he did now. They were employees in the system I helped build. And they knew it. The evening carried on with practiced grace. We made our way through the crowd, shook hands, accepted compliments, toasted with sponsors, and posed for photos. But I could feel them watching me, my mother, my sister, Max. Every time I laughed, every time an executive asked my opinion, every time Noah casually referenced my systems, my structure, my leadership, they weren't just witnessing my success, they were realizing it had nothing to do with them. Later, while Noah was giving a short speech to thank our guests and formally announce the acquisition of Halcyon Holdings, I found myself at the dessert table, sipping champagne and savoring a quiet moment. That's when my mother approached again. She picked up a glass of her own and said, "I always knew you'd do well for yourself." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you?" "You had potential," she said with a tight nod, "but you needed motivation." I laughed under my breath. "That what you call betrayal now?" She sipped. "Rachel needed confidence. You needed a push." "What I needed was support," I said quietly, "but what I found was strength. On my own." She tilted her head. "Well, perhaps I should thank this Noah of yours. He clearly brought out the best in you." I looked her dead in the eye. "He didn't create my success. He respected it. That's the difference." Her smile faltered. She knew I meant every word. Then came Rachel. She walked up like she was preparing for a deposition, face composed, voice calm. "Your husband's impressive," she said, "the way he commands a room." "We built this together," I replied. "That's how real partnerships work." She nodded slowly. "It's good. What you've done." A pause. "I thought maybe I was doing you a favor back then." I tilted my head. "Stealing my boyfriend?" She didn't flinch. "Letting you go, giving you the chance to grow up. You always lived in a dream world, Lena. I thought you'd crash eventually. And yet here we are, I said. You drowning in lawsuits and debt? Me, hosting galas and hiring the people who once underestimated me. She blinked. That hit harder than I expected. But I'm not here to rub it in, I said. I'm not here for revenge. Then why invite us? She asked, genuinely confused. Because I wanted you to see me, I said. Really see me, the version you always tried to silence. She looked away. Max and I, it's not what we thought it would be. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Their unhappiness wasn't my victory. My peace was. Noah found me again after his speech, resting his arm around my shoulders as we looked out over the glowing room. "How you doing?" he asked quietly. "Lighter," I said, like I set down something heavy I didn't know I'd been carrying. "They seem smaller," he said. "Your family." "They are smaller," I replied. "Or maybe I just got bigger." The night ended with applause and quiet goodbyes. Rachel and Max slipped out without fanfare. My mother stayed behind just long enough to try to pitch me on, helping them recover their footing. I declined, with a smile. We returned home past midnight, still in our gala clothes, feet aching, hearts full. Noah kicked off his shoes and collapsed onto the couch. I joined him, tossing my heels aside and resting my head on his shoulder. "Well?" he asked. I closed my eyes. I didn't feel triumphant. "Not really," I said, but I did feel grateful. For what? For everything that pushed me away. If they hadn't betrayed me, I'd still be in Austin. I'd still be waiting for people to choose me. He kissed the top of my head. "You chose yourself," he said. "No," I corrected, smiling softly. "I became myself." We didn't celebrate the gala with champagne or fireworks. We celebrated with leftover cheesecake on the kitchen counter in our pajamas, our feet sore and our bodies exhausted. The glow of the event still lingered in the edges of my mind, but I wasn't buzzing with adrenaline anymore. I was calm, clear. "How do you feel?" Noah asked, sliding the dessert toward me. I stared at the small fork in my hand. "Like I finally closed the door," I said. "Not slammed it. Just turned the handle and walked away." He nodded slowly. "You did good." "No," I corrected. "We did." And we had. Not just in business, not just in marriage, in life. We'd taken heartbreak, humiliation, and loss, and turned it into a foundation. We built something solid where there was once only shame, and now all I felt was lightness. In the days after the gala, the calls started. Old acquaintances from Austin, industry leaders who suddenly wanted to collaborate. Even Rachel sent a message, something stiff and vague about finding clarity. I didn't respond. Some things are better left in the past. One afternoon, I stopped by our office early. I had a rare moment alone before meetings and calls and decision trees took over the day. As I walked past the wall of framed milestones, our first check, our first press feature, our incorporation papers, I noticed the empty spot we'd been saving for our next big achievement. Without thinking, I grabbed a sticky note and wrote 3 words, "Watch me rise." I stuck it right in the center. Then I smiled. It wasn't just a promise anymore. It was history. The weeks passed. Noah and I found a rhythm again. The chaos settled into purpose. Our roles became sharper, our team stronger. We promoted from within, invested in staff development, and restructured for growth. I led our expansion into new markets with confidence I didn't even realize I'd earned. One evening, while reviewing a new proposal for a clean water infrastructure project, I got an email from a Denver gallery. They'd seen my artwork featured in a local magazine write-up on our firm's aesthetic. A tiny mention, one line about how our lobby was designed with original pieces by the co-founder. The gallery director asked if I'd be interested in a show. Just a few pieces, nothing huge. I stared at the screen for a long time, because for years I'd buried that part of myself. The artist, the dreamer, the version of Lena that Rachel, Max, and my mother all dismissed as soft. And yet, here she was again, rising from the ashes of the life they tried to steal. I clicked reply. Yes, I'd be honored. The day of the gallery opening, I arrived 10 minutes before the doors did. Noah had to stay late at the office, but he promised he'd make it before the crowd. I stood alone in the gallery space, walking the line of my own work. Color and shape and emotion splashed across canvas. Some of the pieces were messy, some abstract. One was just black and red swirls with the title Undone and Rebuilt. That one was my favorite. People filtered in slowly, a few press, some collectors, friends. Maya flew in from Philly and surprised me at the door. "You finally did it," she whispered, hugging me tight. "No," I said. "I finally let myself do it." The difference mattered. Noah arrived with flowers and a sheepish smile, kissing my cheek and making a beeline for the wine table. Later, as we stood together in front of Undone and Rebuilt, a woman approached and said, "I felt this one in my chest." I smiled. That's where it came from. The woman looked at my name on the wall, Lena Carter Reynolds. "I don't know your story," she said, "but this work says a lot." I nodded. It says everything. After the gallery closed for the night, Noah and I walked through downtown Denver hand in hand. The air was crisp, streetlights flickered on. The sound of a saxophone echoed from a corner bar. We stopped at a bench. He turned to me, more serious now. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if things had gone differently?" "All the time," I said. "And?" "If Rachel hadn't taken Max, if Mom hadn't tried to erase me, I might still be stuck in Austin, trying to prove myself to people who never wanted to see me." I looked at him. "But because they let me go, I found you. I found this." He brushed a strand of hair from my face. "They gave you freedom. By trying to break you, they handed you the key." I smiled. That's the thing about being underestimated. It's quiet, but when you rise, the whole room hears it. Back home, I changed out of my dress, wiped off my makeup, and looked at myself in the mirror. No titles, no heels, no performance, just Lena. And for the first time in my life, she was more than enough. Epilogue. 1 year later. Raincore expanded to 3 new states. I opened my second gallery exhibit. Noah was invited to speak at Stanford. He insisted I sit front row. At the end of his speech, he didn't talk about metrics or funding rounds or quarterly growth. He talked about partnership, and when someone asked him what the secret to his success was, he didn't hesitate. He smiled. "My wife," he said. "She taught me that building something real means never waiting to be chosen. It means choosing yourself, and then showing the world who they overlooked." The real victory? It wasn't revenge. It wasn't a headline or a title or even the silence of my enemies. It was the peace that came with knowing I didn't just survive them. I became someone they never saw coming, and I never looked back.